Here's the one chart that you need for this bull market when it comes to Bitcoin's price action. We'll be talking about the different phases that we tend to see across time and across history, and we'll be talking about the parabolic phases that occur after the halving, and we'll talk about how long these phases last, because we tend to see many different phases in and around the halving event, and we just need to go with the flow and go with these phases to make the most of this bull market. So subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's talk about the only chart you really need to make the most of this Bitcoin bull market. Whenever we see a macro downtrend break this diagonal resistance over time, whenever we see those break, we see a new bull market take place. And the bull market lasts for a certain time going into the halving, but then we transition into a pre-halving retrace. And this has been the case time and again. Downtrending diagonal resistance for a long time. Going into the bear market bottom, we finally break out from this diagonal resistance, ending the downtrend, and then we rally going into the halving and then experience either sideways or pulling back price action. And the same thing here, diagonal macro downtrend, and we break out going into the halving, and then we experience a sideways or pulling back retrace in and around the halving for multiple months after the halving. And the thing about this chart in particular is that we tend to see a mirror situation occurring when it comes to the halving. So before the halving, we tend to see a bear market bottom. And then after the halving, if we just copy paste 550 days, roughly speaking, then we see a bull market top. So 550 days before the halving is where we see a bear market bottom, and then approximately the same amount of time we tend to see a bull market top occur. And in the post 2016 halving period, we saw price rally for 518 days, so slightly shorter than what we saw in the pre-halving period in terms of a bear market bottom. But nonetheless, if we do the same thing here, 518 days before the halving, we saw a bear market bottom, and then if we just do this again, then the halving is really acting as a mirror, whereby 550 days this time in this cycle, 550 days after the halving, we see a bull market peak. And so if these principles persist, because in this cycle we saw 517 days before the halving, a bear market bottom took place. So if we just extend that by a month, because historically whenever we see, for example, 517 days before the halving, a bear market bottom, then 550 days after the halving is where we see a bull market top. If we see a bull market top 518 days after the halving, then 550 days before the halving is where we saw a bear market bottom. So 517 days after the halving here, if we see a bull market top take place 550 days after the halving, that gets us into September 2025, October 2025. And so this mirror image is really important in just giving us that perspective that really this is the only chart that you need to have here. Ignore the downside volatility, whichever happens in and around this halving period. We tend to see simple downside volatility, whether that's pulling back, whether it's sideways consolidation, post-halving. We're seeing a bit of both, in fact, sideways consolidation, but also a retracing element to that. But we will reverse towards the upside at some point, and that point is coming quite soon, because 160 days after the halving, we see a breakout to new highs. And these are phases that we need to be paying attention to. We have seen the pre-halving rally phase before the halving event. We've seen that many times, pre-2016, pre-2020, and pre-2024 halving, because the pre-halving rally gets us into a halving retrace. So this retrace occurs prior to the halving, but it can persist going into the post-halving period, like it has in this case. Here in 2020, we saw that this pre-halving retrace also persisted. It actually transitioned us into consolidation. And in 2016, you can see that this retrace got priced into really impressive lows after the halving, but then recovered from there. But predominantly, reaccumulation is the phase in which we are in now. So it's this red box where we are retracing, moving sideways for the most part, just sideways consolidation for up to 160 days after the halving. That has historically been the moment whereby price would then transition into the parabolic phase of the cycle, because after reaccumulation, we see post-halving parabolic upside. Parabolic upside takes place after the halving, 160 days after the halving. We see a breakout from the reaccumulation range. Of course, we see diminishing returns in these parabolic phases, but nonetheless, we tend to see those phases take place once price breaks out from that reaccumulation phase, and we're on the cusp of a breakout into the parabolic phase now that September is ending and Q4 of 2024 is beginning as well. So this parabolic phase tends to last a certain amount of time, and if we were to just do this and measure that against here, then you can see that this is roughly the same time in every single cycle. So if we just see that 160 days after the halving is how long this reaccumulation phase lasts, and we tend to see a bull market peak 550 days after the halving, then this parabolic phase should last 390 days or so, 400 days or so. So it is roughly a year of parabolic upside that we see going into the bull market peak. And if that continues, indeed, mid-September 2025, mid-October 2025 is when we'd see a bull market peak occur for Bitcoin. So this reaccumulation phase, now that we're 150 days after the halving, this reaccumulation phase is slowly coming to a close. We've always seen breakouts 160 days after the halving, and this transitions us into the parabolic phase of the cycle. So we're getting really close to a period that lasts a year or even slightly longer before we finally bull market peak. It's been the case in each cycle thus far. Diminishing returns, that's something that we need to keep in mind going forward, because we're not going to rally to new all-time highs on and on and on. There is going to be a bull market peak at some point, and then we're going to enter a year-long bear market. And just notice that if we take a year-long bear market and do the same thing here, then you can see that we bear market top again. So really, it's all about cycles, and these cycles are cyclical and they repeat. The parabolic phase of the cycle lasts 1 year. The bear market lasts 1 year. When it comes to a bull market peak after the halving, that takes 550 days. When it comes to bear market bottom before the halving, that takes 500 days, roughly speaking. We see copy paste situations occur in every cycle. There is a lot of mirroring and recurring in Bitcoin cycles, and as long as you know these cycles, then you can really make the most of this Bitcoin bull market going forward. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and join the newsletter for free in the description down below, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.